Hi, it's Natasha N.K.O. It's officially the 14th of June 2026. It's 5 minutes past midnight. And I'm back with Anna Bennett's Talking Heads. I'm going to read a story called Soldiering On. And I will say, I didn't mention last time that these ones were performed for television at the time of writing. So the woman cast in the main role of Muriel is someone called N.K.O. N.K.O. And for Better Among the Lentils that I read before, the woman cast in the role of Susan was Maggie Smith. But back to soldiering on. Muriel is a brisk, sensible woman in her late 50s. She is in a tweed skirt and cardigan with a single row of pearls, and we come on her settled in a corner of a comfortable home. It is afternoon. It's a funny time, 3 o'clock. Too late for lunch, but a bit early for tea. Besides, there were 1 or 2 brave souls who trekked all the way from Wolverhampton. I couldn't risk giving them tea, or we'd have had a mutiny on our hands. And I think people like to be offered something even if they don't actually eat it. One's first instinct was to make a beeline for the freezer and rout out the inevitable quiche. But I thought, Muriel, old girl, that's a coward's way out. So the upshot was, I stopped up till 2 a.m, trundling out a selection of my old standards. Chicken in a lemon sauce, beef en croûte from the old Colchester days, I thought of Jessie Marchant, and bushels of assorted salads. As it happened, it wasn't exactly a salady day, quite crisp for April actually. However, Mabel warmed up the proceedings with one of her famous soups, conjured up out of thin air, so we lived to fight another day. Nobody could quite put their finger on the flavour, so I was able to go around saying, "Have you guessed the soup yet?" And that broke the ice a bit. I don't know what had got into Mabel, but she'd gone mad and added a pinch of curry, and that foxed most people. It was cauliflower, actually. Still, it was a bit sticky at the start, as these conversations generally are. There were people there one didn't know from Adam. All the Massey Ferguson people, for instance, completely unknown quantities to me, and then lots of people I knew I shouldn't know and didn't. Rather, it says, and then lots of people I knew I should know and didn't. But whenever I saw anyone looking lost, I thought of Ralph and grabbed hold of someone I did know and breezed up saying, "This is Jocelyn. She's at the Royal College of Art. I don't know your name, but the odds are you're in agricultural machinery." And then left them to it. It was a case of light the blue torch. It was a case of light the blue touch paper and retire. Knowing Ralph, of course, it was a real mixed bag. Several there from the Sports Council and quite a contingent from Tonbridge. Some friends of Norwich Cathedral and a discharged Prisoners' Aid Society. Madge and Perce, whom we met on the Mauritania on our honeymoon. Donald and Joyce Bannerman, who were actually en route for Abu Dhabi. Then Donald bought a paper at Heathrow, saw the announcement and came straight down. And one sweet old man who'd come all the way over from Margate. He said, "You won't remember me, Mrs. Carpenter, but I'm a member of the criminal fraternity." I shrieked. As the vicar said, Ralph touched life at many points. The children magnificent, of course. Or Giles, at any rate. Luckily, Margaret didn't appear. But Giles took off all the household brigade people on a tour of the garden, while Pippa coped with some of the bigwigs from the city. "I don't think you know George," I heard one of them say. "George cracks a whip at Goodison Brown. Poor souls, they both of them deserved medals. And Crispin and Lucy angelic. Crispin popping in and out of people's legs, reaching up to fill the glasses. I wanted them to have a rest." "No," said Giles, "let them do it. They adored their grandpa, adored him," said Pippa, "like we all did." The church had been absolutely chocker, and I'd managed not to blub until right at the finish, when they struck up with "I vow to thee, my country." And then I had 101 things to do, so I was perfectly all right until I saw awful Angela Gillespie had made the mistake of talking to boring old Frank from the firm, and I heard the dreaded words forklift trucks. And thought how many times I used to have to shut Ralph up in similar circumstances. And the idea of shutting Ralph up at all set me off instantly, and I had to nip into the pantry to staunch the flow. Shortly to be followed by Mabel, who'd just fallen over one of his old Wellingtons and promptly gone into floods. So we had a good laugh and a good cry over that, before powdering our noses and hurling ourselves back into the fray. When everybody'd gone, I'm just having 5 minutes in a chair before tackling the debris when Margaret comes plunging into the room. She said, "What were all those people?" I said, "It was a kind of party for Daddy." She said, "Why, is he dead?" I said, "You know he's dead." She said, "Who killed him?" I said, "Don't be such a donkey. Come along and we'll find you a tablet." Some of Ralph's medicine still in the cupboard. Fat lot of good that did, I thought, and poured it down the lav. Then felt a bit choked. Anyway, the tablet did the trick. I heard her walking about at 2 a.m, but I didn't get up. Except then I had to get up anyway because it suddenly came to me, in all the excitement, I'd completely forgotten to feed the dogs. Go to black. Come up on Muriel sitting in an armchair. Evening. Everybody I run into says not to take any big decisions. I staggered into the community centre, bearing Ralph's entire wardrobe, which Angela Gillespie had nipped in smartish and earmarked for muscular dystrophy. 5 minutes later, Brenda Bousfield had come knocking at the door on behalf of cystic fibrosis. Knives out straight away, I practically had to separate them. In fact, I did separate them in the end. The city suits to Angela and Brenda the tweeds. All lovely stuff. Beautiful dinner jacket from Hawes and Curtis, done for Giles if he hadn't got so fat. Mind you, he didn't want the ties either. Angela did. "Lovely jumble," she said. "How are you coping? Don't take any big decisions, one day at a time." "I don't see any shoes." Actually, I'd been silly and kept his shoes back. I loved his shoes, always used to clean them. "My shoon shine, lady." "Whatever you do," Angela said, "don't give them to Brenda. They're top heavy on staff, their group, it's well known. It all goes on the admin. We can use shoes." I thought I'd go into the library and see if Miss Dunsmore could find me something on bereavement. That's something I learned from Ralph. Plug into other people's experience. Pool your resources. A new experience is like travelling through unknown country. But remember, others have taken this road before you, old girl, and left notes. So question number one, is there a map? Question number 2, am I taking advantage of all the information available? It doesn't matter if you're going to get married, commit a burglary, or keep a guinea pig. Efficiency is a proper collation of information. Oh, Ralph. Miss Dunsmore did a reconnoitre around, but the only information she could come up with was a book about burial customs in Papua New Guinea. I think even Ralph would draw the line at that. However, she thought the health centre did a pamphlet on bereavement. Miss Dunsmore said she wasn't offering this as consolation, but apparently elephants go into mourning, and so very strangely does the pike. So we chatted about that for a bit, told me not to take any big decisions, and if I was throwing any of his books, could I steer them her way, as she ran some sort of reading service for the disabled. I dropped into the health centre, and the receptionist said there was a pamphlet on death. They'd had some on the counter. Only the tots kept taking them to scribble on, so they hadn't reordered. She said she'd skimmed through it, and the gist of it was not to take any big decisions, and to throw yourself into something. I said, "You don't mean the canal?" She said, "Come again?" Nobody expects you to make jokes. As I was going out, she called me back and said, "Did Ralph wear spectacles? Because if he did, not to throw away the old pairs, as owing to cutbacks they started the spectacles recycling scheme." Back at base, Mabel said Margaret had been plonked on the chair in the passage all morning, with her bag packed and her outside coat on, and for some reason Wellington boots. Said the police were coming. We manhandled her upstairs, and after about 17 goes, I managed to smuggle in a tablet, which did the trick. and she'd just settled down for a little ziz when who should draw up at the door but Giles. He'd cancelled all his appointments, eluded the guards at the office, and just belted down the A12 because he suddenly thought I might need cheering up. Bless him. He could always get round Mabel ever since he was little, so she agrees to hold the fort while he whisks me off to lunch at somewhere rather swish. I thought to myself, I hope you're watching, Ralph, you old rascal, and eating your words. Ralph and Giles never got on for more than 5 minutes, whereas it's funny, he was always dotty about Mags. When eventually we get back, what with all the wine, etc., I mean pudding and cheese, I'm just longing to put my head down, but Giles cracks the whip and gets me to sign lots of papers. It turns out Ralph's left me very nicely off. What with the house and all his various holdings, one way and another I'm quite a rich lady. He's tied a bit up for Margaret, nothing specific for Giles, but he doesn't mind because of course he doesn't need any, and when I go he'll get it all anyway. But what I do have is what Giles calls a liquidity problem. And the first item on the agenda is to give me some ready cash, hence the papers. Then something about buying a forest. Bit wary to start with, said, can I not mull it? And Giles said, well, you can, but the index is going down. I said, what about Mr. Sherlock? Giles said, you know what lawyers are. Wish old Ralph could have seen me, signing away. He never showed me any papers at all, whereas Giles took me through them and explained it all. I suppose it's a different generation. What he did do, which made me feel a tiny bit shifty, was to take away 3 or 4 of the best pictures, the 2 carriage clocks and a couple of other choice items. Said that when the sharks from the revenue come round to assess the stuff for estate duty, these were just the items that would bump the figure up. I said, what about the inventory? Giles said, I think we'll just drag our brogues on that one. Apparently everybody does it. He's just going to keep the stuff under the bed at Sloane Street until the heat is off, then back they come. Margaret's still lying on the bed when I went upstairs. Asleep, she looks quite presentable. Daddy's little girl. Not so little now, those great legs. But as Mabel says, it looks as if we're on the hospital trail again. If she goes in, I could perhaps go to Siena, except I have nobody to go with. One keeps forgetting that. Go to Black. Come up on Muriel, sitting at a table writing letters. Afternoon. It's not an ideal place. No one is saying it is. Even Giles doesn't say it is. In fact, it's a perfect example of one of those places they're always famously about to scrap. Started life as a workhouse, probably, during the Napoleonic Wars, and qua building not displeasing, as someone weaned on Nicolaus Pevsner and practically a founder member of the National Trust, I wouldn't alter a single brick. And as an art centre first rate, as a museum of industrial archaeology, couldn't be bettered. Or as a craft centre, weaving, pottery, a shop window where craftsmen and craftswomen can make and display their wares. Absolutely ideal, the very place. But as a mental hospital, oh no. The food, for instance, the food has to cross a courtyard. The kitchen is so far away, for all I know it may have to cross a frontier. 1 toilet per floor. I just put my head round the door and wished I hadn't. No telephone that I could see, and the bed so crammed together, if you got out of one, you'd be into another. Dreadful. And of course I keep thinking of Ridgway's, the cup of tea, the matron's parlour, and that immaculate lawn. It would break old Ralph's heart, but Ridgway cost money. It always did. First of the month, beg to inform, respectfully submit, all very nice, but £600 on the dot, and more, and more. And as Giles says, mummy no can do. That kind of money we do not have. Well, we do, but it's all tied up. And whereas in normal circumstances, one would have fought tooth and nail to keep her in the private sector, just out of respect for Daddy, nowadays we are in what Giles calls a different ball game, and the old thing minds. Goodness, he minds. I wanted him to come with me today, but just the idea of the place upsets him so much he won't even set foot in it. And actually I feel the same. But where is that going to get us? I thought of Ralph as if I ever think of anybody else. And I thought, come on, Muriel, you're a widow lady. You've got time on your hands. If anybody's in a position to roll their sleeves up, it's you. So today, when I paid Mags a visit, I got the name of the hospital secretary, Almoner he used to be called in my day, and bearded him in his den. He did have a beard, actually, and looked pretty sorry for himself besides. It turns out he has to precept for absolutely everything down to the last toilet roll, and if he does have any brainwaves about improvements and can sell them to his own management committee, he's still at the mercy of the regional spending programme. I asked about a table tennis table. He said, my point exactly. A table tennis table would mean going cap in hand to Ipswich, which he's not anxious to do, since the vegetable steamer's on its last legs. And on the rare occasions he does have a bit of latitude, he finds his hands are tied by NUPE. Well, the upshot is I'm writing sheaves of letters to everybody I've ever heard of in an effort to plug the hospital into the coffee morning circuit and get a support group started. What I'm saying is that mental illness is a scourge. It's also a mystery. Can occur in the best regulated families and nobody knows why. I mean, take us. Why have we been singled out? Loving parents, perfectly normal childhood, then this. When I went in this afternoon, Margaret was weaving a basket and not making a bad stab at it really, all things considered. It's lucky I arrived when I did, because she'd just got to the part where she'd had to integrate the handle with the main body and she was making a real pig's breakfast of it. So I got cracking and showed her the whys and wherefores and actually ended up making both handles, which seemed to make her a lot happier. She'd never been much good with her hands. Giles was a real wizard. Apropos, Giles, there's a bit of a crisis with the funds, apparently. Nothing serious. A chum's let him down. Didn't read the small print. Says it's nothing to worry about, though we may have to pull our horns in a bit further. So I said, all hands to the pumps. With all Daddy's contacts in the city, why don't I start up a little catering business, executive lunches and the like, good nursery food and lashings of it? Giles not sure. Thought these days they wanted something a bit more nouvelle. I laughed. I said, don't you believe it? Men are overgrown schoolboys, always were. Preached salad at Ralph for years, and what good did it do? Giles said, small detail, Mum. What are you going to use for capital? So that put the tin hat on that one. It's this bloody liquidity thing. It's funny, I never heard Ralph mention it. Go to Blake. Come up on Muriel in a bare, unfurnished room. A suitcase open, a tea chest. Afternoon. Job sorting out the one or two things I want to keep, though quite honestly, I'm not sorry to see the back of most of it. I feel it puts me more in the same boat as Ralph. Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth type of thing. The lilies of the field syndrome. Said this to the vicar who was looking round. He thought this was a healthy attitude, and how much did I think the walnut side table might fetch? It would go so well in their hall. Huge marquee on the lawn, people trooping for the house, and Angela Gillespie never away. Said how horrid it must be to see people poking about one's prized possessions. I said yes, but it isn't really. The person I do feel sorry for is Mabel, who's had to polish all these years. Still, she was getting on like a house on fire with the auctioneer's men, who were all so careful and polite I'd have married any of them on the spot. Angela beefing on about all the dealers being here, putting up the prices. I thought, good job. Still, however much it all fetches, it will only be a drop in the ocean. At one point, Angela got the Duttons in a corner and started telling the tale. Said Giles had always been a wrong un. I turned round and said she didn't know what she was talking about. It had been a genuine mistake. She said, mistake? Hundreds of people losing their life savings a mistake? I said, so why do you think I'm selling up? She said, it wasn't your fault. Why should you suffer? That's what worries me, Muriel. It's not fair on you. Fair on me or not, it didn't stop her buying the corner cupboard. She's had her eye on it for years. I suppose Giles has been a scamp, but I don't think he's been wicked. Just not very bright, that's all. Still, Sloane Street is in Pippa's name, so that's a blessing, and the school fees were covenanted for years ago, so it's not all gloom. I sat under the chestnut tree while the sale was going on, and thought how none of this would have happened if Ralph hadn't died. Then I heard him say, "Buck up, old girl," and went and gave a hand with the tea. I haven't told Margaret yet. Her 14-year-old psychiatrist thinks this may not be the moment. Sees some signs of improvement. Margaret brought him some tulips last week. Picked them from one of the hospital flower beds. I apologised and said I could give them some of our bulbs. He said not at all. It was a sign she was becoming more outgoing. Wanted to know about Ralph and Margaret. I said, in what way? He said, no particular way. When she was little. I said, Ralph was fond of her. She was his little girl. He said, yes. Took the dogs up the hill later on. They're next, I suppose. Bloody psychiatrist. Go to Blake. Come up on Muriel in a plain boarding house room. Evening. Crack of dawn this morning, I routed out my trusty green cosy and spent a happy half-hour breasting the billows. The old cosy seen better days, and the moth has got into the bust, but as the only people about were one or two brave souls walking the dog, I didn't frighten the troops. Came back hungry as a hunter, so boiled myself an egg on the ring and had it with a slice of rye-vita, sitting in the window. Sun just catches it for an hour then. Lovely. I tidied the room, did one or two jobs, and then toddled along to the library and had a walk around Boots, by which time it was getting on for lunchtime. It's surprising how time does go. When I think of the things I used to get through in the old days, I wonder how I did it. Been here about a month now. Got onto it via an advert in the Lady. Sledmare it's called. Holiday flatlets. Off-season, of course, and quite reasonable. I haven't quite got the town sorted out yet. I feel sure there must be a community here, if only I can put my finger on it. I had a word with a young woman at the town hall. Blue fingernails, but civil enough otherwise. Said, was I interested in Meals on Wheels? I said, rather. I was too. I see Meals on Wheels for the whole of Sudbury. A fund of experience. Brawn not too good, but brains available to be picked at any time. She looked a bit blank. Turns out she meant, did I want to be on the receiving end? I said, not on your life, but message received and understood. The old girl's past it, hence the swim, I suppose. Still, I soldier on, and it's not quite orphans of the storm time. I look round the shops quite a bit, and if I'm lucky I run into Angela Gillespie, who's got her mother in her home here and comes over from time to time. We have coffee and a natter about the old days, though I can't do that too often. Morning coffee these days seems to cost a king's ransom, and with me there doesn't have to be coffee. Pardon. I can talk to anybody. The other morning I got chatting to one of these young men in orange who bang their tambourines in the precinct. Came up to me rattling his bowl, shaven head but otherwise quite sensible. His view is that life is some kind of prep, trial run. Things were being buffed up for a better role next time. As sensible as anything else, I suppose. I said, well, I just hope it's not in Hunstanton. She laughs. The big bright spot on the horizon is Margaret. Heaps better. Lost a lot of weight. Got rid of that terrible cardigan and now is quite a good-looking young woman. In a hostel up to praise. But planning on getting a small flat. Came down last week and says next time it could be under her own steam. Takes her driving test in 10 days. Miracle. She took me out to lunch just like a normal girl. Talked about Ralph, etc. Doesn't blame him. Wishes he were alive. I don't know what I think. Sorry for him, I suppose. She paid the bill and left a tip, just as if she'd been doing it all her life. Of course, she'll be nicely off now. Ralph tied it all up so tight even Giles couldn't get his hands on it, the rascal. Don't see him and Pippa much, not a peep out of them for over a month now. Doesn't like to come down, says it upsets him. Don't know why. Doesn't upset me. Missed the tinies. Not so tiny. Lucy will be 12 now, and 12 is like 15. Married next. I'd seen myself as a model grandmother. taking them to Peter Pan and the Science Museum. Not to be. Another dream bites the dust. My big passion now is the telly box. Never bothered with it before. These days I watch it all the time, and I'm not the discerning viewer. No fear. Rubbish. Australian series in the afternoon. Everything. Glued to it all. Fan. The dialogue is more broken up now. I sometimes wonder if I killed Ralph. All those death-dealing breakfasts. We haven't had much weather to speak of. Eat less now. A buttered scone goes a long way. She picks up a Walkman and headphones. This is my new toy. Seen children with them. Never appreciated what they were. Asked a young man for a listen in the precinct. Revelation. Saved up and bought one. Get the cassettes out the library. Worth its weight in gold. Marvellous. She puts it on and henceforth speaks in bursts and too loudly. I wouldn't want you to think this was a tragic story. I'm not a tragic woman. I'm not that type. Fade out to the faint sound of music, possibly Joanne Strauss. The end. Thanks for listening.